Good morning and welcome to How to Pivot to Sell in the New Economy. My name is Mary Lombardo and I'm the CEO of Absolute Impact Corporation, and I'll be sharing a little bit more about myself in just a moment. So I'm pretty sure that many of you joined today because you might have some questions like, should we be selling right now? Is it too insensitive to be selling right now? Should we pivot? And if so, how? Or how do we get in front of more people, especially with less people answering the phone? Or just given the current situation we're living in, more people might simply be focusing on family than business. Or you might have questions about how do I actually get people to make a decision? And I know I've heard many times, Mary, we have no idea what's going to be happening with our business for the next few months. So give us a call back after the first of the year. So today, we're going to be talking about these types of things and focusing on what you can be doing right now with your sales organization or your salespeople to pivot and to be successful in this new economy. And my promise to you is that at the end of this webinar, you're going to have 3 things you can do right now to close more business. And it doesn't matter if you're a solopreneur and you're trying to figure out how to do it all, or you might have a few salespeople, but sales might not be your thing, and you're trying to figure out how to keep these salespeople motivated. Or you might have an entire sales staff. My promise is that the 3 things I share with you today, they're going to apply to you. Now you may have to tweak things, or you may have to change a few things to adapt to your specific situation, but regardless of the size of your business or your industry, these 3 things, they'll be applicable to you. And at the end of this session, you'll be able to schedule a free 30-minute strategy meeting with me. And the reason that I'm doing this is that I know after 20 years of working with sales teams and building sales teams and having my own business as a sales consultant, I know that you're going to have questions. I know that you might want to try these things that I'm going to share with you, and you'll have questions about how to implement or where to start. So I want to make sure that you have answers available to you. So again, at the end, if you'd like to schedule some time, you'll be able to do that. So let me share with you a little bit about myself. I spent over 20 years in sales leadership positions. I was the VP of sales for the largest ed tech company in the world. So I managed huge sales teams, over 150 people. And for the last 3 years, I've been focusing on helping small to mid-sized companies streamline their sales process so that they could scale and grow their business. This isn't the first time I've had to pivot. And this time that we're experiencing right now really reminds me of a time in my career where I had to really pivot. And I was brought into a company whose business was to provide after-school programs to underprivileged students nationwide. And just to give you a hint of the culture, they had hired and fired upper management 13 times. So I was walking into a business that had a lot of uncertainty. So it was my job to figure out what was working, and there wasn't much working, and get this sales division back on track. And the first 30 days required me to take an almost surgical approach to the sales department and everyone that interacted with sales, which was pretty much the whole company. And I realized really quickly that if I didn't want my head on the chopping block in 30 days, I was going to have to make some pretty significant pivots in areas where I could and completely change other facets of the business. And I imagine that many of you are here today because you've had some pretty significant impact to your business given this pandemic we're living through. And none of us have the luxury right now to let deals fall through the cracks, not if we have the opportunity to close them. So I want to bring all of my experience as a VP of sales, as a sales leader, and as a sales consultant, and share with you 3 different ways that your sales team and your business can not only survive this pandemic, but thrive. Now, first things first, my philosophy is, if you have products or services that can solve a problem in someone's life or their business, now's not the time to shrink or go silent. I believe we have an obligation to serve our clients, and we serve them through selling. So this isn't an opportunity to put your head in the sand, and it's certainly not a time to carry a belief that you're going to be too pushy. This is an opportunity to serve our clients, especially if we're helping our clients. So now let's talk about the first thing you can do to pivot to make sure your salespeople are prepared to sell in the new economy. So the first thing you'll want to consider is pivoting or repositioning your offer. So what does that mean? The companies and salespeople that choose to pivot versus push back are the ones that won't only survive, but they're going to thrive. This is a time that we need to be nimble and open to new ideas and new ways of thinking about our business, as opposed to hanging on to what worked in the past. None of us have experienced this level of uncertainty, and we're in the process of creating a new normal, but we don't know what that's going to look like yet. So I offer that the companies and salespeople that choose to pivot versus pushing back on old beliefs are the ones that are not only going to survive this time, but they're going to thrive. So here are 6 areas that you might need to pivot in your organization. Now, for some of you, all 6 will apply, and for others, it might just be 1 or 2. But the first area you might want to consider is your business model. Is your business model still working? And a perfect example of this is restaurants. Restaurants have had to change their business model from offering dine-in service to takeout or curbside pickup. So I suggest that you reflect on your business model and think about if it's still working. For myself, someone who's done a ton of sales training, we've had to shift our business model because we no longer offer face-to-face training. We've had to pivot our offer, and now we're providing virtual services. I mean, look at what we're doing today. We're doing a webinar. So does your business model still work? The other thing you might want to consider is the market. I've had several clients that were doing B2C business, and now they've flipped to focusing on B2B. So they're looking at a different target market, and that puts them in a better position for people to purchase their product and services. So look at your organization and think about, given the times that we're living in, do you need to pivot your market? Do you need to expand your market? Or do you need to change your market altogether? And the third area that you might need to pivot is your messaging. Now, I'm a fundamental believer that there's 2 reasons that people buy: pain or pleasure. And pre-coronavirus, it was easier to talk to someone about something that was nice to have. And it was a bonus in my world when people would come to me and say, Mary, our salespeople are doing pretty well, but I really would like to up-level their skills just a bit. You know, is there anything new? Are there any new strategies or tactics that you can teach them so that they can just get better? So that's the type of messaging I could lean into pre-coronavirus. So if they were doing well and they just wanted to get better, that was selling pleasure. But that's not the world we're living in today. Now there's a ton of question marks hanging over people's heads, and people are typically not buying for pleasure. They're buying to avoid pain. So I want you to think about how you're currently messaging or positioning your offer. Are you positioning it as a nice to have? Or have you made the pivot to position it as a need to have to solve pain versus selling pleasure? The next thing you might need to pivot is your marketing. I have a ton of clients that were scrambling because now that we've had to go digital, they didn't know where to start. So digital marketing, social media marketing, all these different platforms, doing webinars, doing things that get people into the funnel. So you need to be looking at your marketing strategy and your lead generation strategy and think about what you need to add or what you need to change so that you can adapt to this current market. I also have some clients that had to change their offer altogether. And a great example of this is what I've seen in the alcohol industry. Many alcohol manufacturers have shifted to now include making hand sanitizer. So they've changed their main offer because it's relevant to the times we're living in right now. And I want to make sure you understand that a pivot doesn't need to be permanent. A pivot can be something that you do temporarily just to get yourself and your business through this season until we figure out what's going to happen next. And a nice outcome of a pivot is that you might discover there's another opportunity that presents itself and that you want to switch to, and it's going to be more permanent. Pivots open up new opportunities for all of us, But the main point that I'm trying to make about these areas is that a pivot does not have to be permanent. And the last thing you want to consider is your methodology. And what I mean by methodology is your sales process, the way you onboard clients and the steps you take people through. In my world, the methodology's changed because I'm no longer offering face-to-face training, and all of my sales training is done remotely. So the methodology is different, and the way I get in front of my clients is different. The way I interact with my clients is different. And it's not only different for me, but I'm working with clients to look at their business model and their marketing and their messaging and their main offer and even their methodology to see what they need to change to pivot during this season so that they can survive this time of uncertainty. And I think this is a huge opportunity for you to look at these 6 areas of business and think about what's working and what's not. Now, the second area that you want to pivot is your metrics. Pre-coronavirus, companies could get away with tracking 1 metric. And I'm a firm believer in what Tom Peters used to say, and that is what gets measured gets done. And I think we can all agree to that. Coronavirus or not, 3 metrics should have always been tracked. And in most organizations, they're only tracking 1. So let me walk you through these metrics from left to right. The first metrics is behavior. That's the activity that your salespeople do. The second here in the middle is what we call leading indicators. Your leading indicators are a result of the behaviors that your salespeople do every day. And the last metric are your lagging indicators, results. So let's break it down a little bit more. In general, most businesses track lagging indicators, results, money, revenue, profit, number of new clients. This is history once it happens. There's absolutely nothing you can do about your lagging indicators and the information that that offers. Now, don't get me wrong, it's not a bad thing to track your lagging indicators, but you need to get ahead of those lagging indicators to make sure that you're on track. Otherwise, it could take you 30, 60, 90 days, maybe even 6 months to figure out if you're on track or not. And quite frankly, that might be too late. So you can't afford to track only lagging indicators. You need to be able to get information or red flags earlier in the process so you know what you need to adjust to make sure that you're going to hit your numbers. So again, lagging indicators are results. They're revenue, profit margins, number of new clients. But these are the results of everything that happens prior to getting here. The next thing you should be tracking are leading indicators. Leading indicators are going to be things like the number of appointments you have, number of demos, number of pilots, whatever might be applicable to your business. So the key thing about tracking metrics is that we can dial in to problems before they happen, or we can measure what we need to change or adjust to make sure that we're going to hit our numbers, or that we're going to hit revenue. Whatever the goals are that you have set, you have to track them early on. You can look at things like, do you have enough appointments? Do you have enough phone calls? Do you have enough demos? And if you're in the software space and you're not doing enough demos, you know you're not going to be able to convert enough new customers on the back end if you don't have those demos. So you need to know what these leading indicators are. And this is something I work on with my clients. We're going to work together to identify the metrics that are going to be the most useful to their business. And just know that you don't need to be tracking 20 metrics. That's too much. But you want to make sure that you dial in to have the right metrics that are specific to your business so that you'll be alerted to any problems and you can fix them before it's too late. And here's another thing I would say. Given the time that I've spent in sales and sales leadership and working with small businesses, I believe that 95% of small businesses do not track, but you definitely should. And this is a major, major pivot. The most important thing that you need to be tracking are behaviors. The activity that your salespeople do on a daily basis is incredibly important, especially now since everyone's working remotely. You can't wait 6 months to figure out if you're going to hit your target. You can't wait 3 months to figure out if you have enough new prospects in the funnel. You can't wait 60 days to figure out if you've got enough appointments. You need to be tracking behaviors on a weekly, if not daily basis. So, do you know the activities that your salespeople are doing? How many phone calls are they making? How many referrals are they asking for? How are they talking to potential prospects? That's what you need to be tracking. And I cannot stress enough how important this pivot is. The most important metrics you need to be monitoring right now in this new economy we're living in right now are behaviors. You need to set clear expectations of the level of activity that are going to generate leading indicators that will then turn to lagging indicators, and this will represent your revenue. Now, the third pivot you want to make in your business is you need a sales process that consistently converts prospects into paying clients. And I highlight the word consistently. I talk to many small business owners and they say they have a sales process in place. But when I listen to their salespeople on phone calls or in Zoom meetings or even participate in one of their webinars, I quickly determine there really is no consistency. And I want to be clear here. By consistency, I don't mean we want to create robots. What I mean is that we have to have a roadmap on how salespeople handle conversations. What stages and steps are your salespeople taking a prospect through that will consistently increase their chances of closing a deal? You need to have a sales process that's written and that actually maps out stages and steps of a best case scenario or milestones that your salespeople can follow. The business that I mentioned earlier that I walked into and I had to make some pretty significant pivots, this is one of the components that helped me to transform their sales department. I had to identify a sales process and I had to identify those stages and steps that we needed to hit our goals and that was going to increase our chances of closing a deal. So I had to really identify who were the people that we needed to get in front of, what were their pain points, and what did we need to be talking to them about? What questions did our sales team need to be asking? And how long was it taking to move through the sales process step by step? So this didn't only build consistency, but it also built confidence in the sales team because they knew what they needed to do to take each person through a sales process, step by step. Now I work with organizations to help them map out their sales process, but more importantly, I'm training their salespeople on what a sales conversation should sound like, what are the stages to help convert more prospects into paying clients. So your salespeople need to know a sales process that's documented and consistent so that they have a higher chance of converting prospects into paying clients. So let's do a brief recap. There are 3 ways you can pivot your business in this new economy, and the number one pivot is to reposition your offer so that it's relevant to your prospects' needs right now. If you sell something that's off into the future, people are always going to say, call me back in 6 months. It needs to be relevant right now. The second pivot is to pivot your metrics so you're tracking the right things. Remember, what gets measured gets done. So if you're not measuring the correct metrics and if you're not measuring the behaviors of your salespeople on a daily or a weekly basis, then you're putting yourself in a position of risk. And you won't know that for 6 months from now. And quite frankly, most small businesses don't have that leeway. I know my business doesn't. And a lot of clients that I'm working with need to know the metrics every single week. They need to know if they're off track or how they can identify problems quickly. And I show them how to do this in an easy way that's not micromanaging. And the last thing you want to pivot is to have a sales process in place that consistently converts sales. Right now, you can't afford to let salespeople get creative, and you can't afford to let them do their own thing. You can't afford to let them rely on their personality or their charisma, or have them tell you that every deal is different. Every deal might be different, but the process is the same. You need to give them a roadmap that's going to allow them the best chance to convert. And the easiest way to do this is by mapping out a sales process. And one of the ways I work with my clients is to do exactly this. We map out a sales plan and a sales process that's documented. So one last thing I want to share with you before I end this presentation is I wanted to share with you the outcome of that organization that brought me on in such a time of uncertainty. I used all of these pivots that I just shared with you, and I applied them all to this business. I pivoted their main offer to not only include after-school children, but before-school children. And this pivot increased their market share and had an immediate impact on their revenue. I pivoted their sales process by creating and implementing a sales roadmap that was documented and that offered consistency, and it allowed salespeople to move prospects through a sales process stage by stage. And I monitored metrics. I monitored leading indicators and behaviors so that I knew what I was going to anticipate in those lagging indicators. I knew with a very small margin of error where we were going to be at, what those lagging indicators, what that history report was going to tell us. And by doing this, the result was a 235% increase in revenue. And instead of firing people, I was able to add headcount nationwide. So I'd like to thank you for your time today. And again, if you'd like to book a 30-minute strategy session with me, you can do that here, or you can also download a free copy of my 20 questions audit for your sales team. Thank you.